What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we've got a lot to get to in this episode. A lot happening in college football. We're going to keep you up to date here on the Extra Point. We're going to talk, a few hours old, Texas and Oklahoma officially joining the SEC in 2024. We're going to talk through who has the easiest and then most difficult schedules for the ACC, Big 12, and Pac-12, who recently released their schedules. Two of those conferences one going no divisions for the first time. Pac-12 technically did it this past year, but we'll dive into that. Bama's made some coordinator hires. Ferentz. Brian Ferentz got a new contract with some interesting details. Miami's looking for coaches. Dan, we got a lot to get to. How's your week going?
Going good. Just when you think it's the off season, we had signing day last week, and we knew we were going to talk schedules this week, but wow, something great has dropped into our lap with this Texas Oklahoma deal. I think that's probably where we're going to get started, but this is just a packed college football news being in early February here when the Super Bowl is supposed to get all its glory. Here comes college football with some information.
Texas and Oklahoma officially joining the SEC in 2024. This will be their last season in the Big 12. Some details out of this is the schools are going to forfeit a combined $100 million in revenue distribution from the Big 12. The agreement also says that Fox is going to get about $20 million of that revenue back out of that $100 million from Texas and Oklahoma. Biggest thing here that came out this week was that a deal was not going to be reached, and it was going to be until 2025 whenever Texas and Oklahoma join, which is a big deal because 2024 is when the expanded playoff starts. That's when USC and UCLA will be in the Big 10. The Big 12 already has their new team, so it was kind of like, hey, let's get everything settled before next season.
Right.
So Fox was the one who got in the way, and rightfully so. If I'm Fox, I'm not budging because they're the ones who are going to miss out on the money. It's estimated that of the Big 12's revenue, about 60% of the viewership and revenue comes from Oklahoma and Texas. So if I'm Fox, I wouldn't budge either. But hey, money talks, and now we get 2024. We'll see the new look SEC.
Yeah, this is interesting because, well, of course, you mentioned a couple days ago, beginning of the week, maybe end of last week, we got the news that, this is probably just going to be until 2025. Everybody just sit tight. That's a classic negotiation tactic. Let's leak that out, and all of a sudden now we have a deal. It's amazing. Fox was going to be hurting this. Is it this season that the NBC deal kicks in for the Big Ten, where Big Noon Kickoff, while it still is in play for Fox, there's going to be the nightly NBC game, and that's going to be, you can say noon is a primetime slot if you want to, but at night on NBC is going to be a primetime slot. That's where Todd Blackledge, who recently left from ESPN, is now going to be the color analyst, which is a major crew, for NBC. And I think that, in and of itself, Fox was going to have to budge at some point. They both kind of get, give a little, and they get this deal done. Jacob, some people, might mention, well, it's just 1 year. We knew that Texas and Oklahoma were going to go to the SEC in 2025. 2024, you already mentioned some of the significance in, obviously all the other conferences kind of getting settled with 2024 leading into the new playoff model. Something else, though, is this pushes up the SEC's announcement of what we're going to be doing. What are the divisions going to look like? They're no longer going to be an East and West, which has been the traditional divide. It's going to most likely be some sort of a, pod model, if you will, or just a permanent opponent model. The SEC is going to bow its chest and say, we came up with our very own, when, the ACC has already kind of had their own, model of, they did it first of having a couple, regular opponents. Pac-12 recently did something similar. So SEC is probably going to model something similar to that. Does this mean we get a ninth conference game? None of this has been officially ruled in or ruled out, but I would think SEC meetings are happening this weekend. That's a big key. Initial SEC meetings. SEC coaches meeting happen, I believe it's the end of May. It's right there, right around the turn of summer, like May to June. And then obviously you got SEC media days. I think by the time we get to that coaches meeting in the end of May, we're going to have permanent opponents. If not before that, right after that, it's going to be announced as far as what the permanent opponent or whatever the model, if it's a 3-6 model, a 1-8 model, whatever they go with, 1-7 model, if they're going to stick with 8 games. SEC has been married to 8 games for so long. But that's something that's kind of hidden that is going to be a news item for this offseason that we're going to get, and not have to feel like we wait till 2024 for something. We'll get to know something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll mention one more thing that's in this agreement. Michigan and Texas have a home and home scheduled for 2024 and 2027. Initially, the game was going to be played in Austin in 2024 and then in Ann Arbor in 2027. As a part of this deal, they flip-flopped. So now this game will be played in Austin in 2024. It will be played in Ann Arbor at Michigan in 2024, which means Fox still gets the game in the 24 season. Because by 2027, Fox will no longer have the rights to the Big Ten. And so in 27, when the game was supposed to be at Michigan, basically Fox would have missed out on both games with the current TV deals. But with them switching to home and home, now Fox will get the game in Ann Arbor. ESPN will get the game in Austin. That was confusing. Fox is getting a Texas-Michigan game. There you go.
Yeah.
They flip-flopped who is going to go, to the other teams the years. That was the other part of the deal. But, hey, again, I'm excited as a football fan because 2024 will just be like the start of the new era of college football, conference realignment in its current state, like two, Big Ten, SEC, 16-team super leagues. We'll see if the Pac-12 makes any more moves with, San Diego State has come out today. SMU, apparently Pac-12 commissioners visited both schools. You're losing USC and UCLA, so I don't think it's not a lot of pull getting those teams, but I do hope the SEC, the perfect solution's on the table. 3 permanent rivalries, 9-game conference schedule. Every 2 years, you play every team in your conference. Like 3, 6, and 6 is 15. You play every team in your league every 2 years. And then every 4 years, you have a home and away game with every team in your conference. That's the way to do it. That's the easiest way to do it. Also excited to see for the Big Ten and the SEC, the model in which there is it's not officially been announced yet, I guess, but divisionless football in those conferences, which is a great transition to talk about some divisionless football that is going on elsewhere in the country. Let's start in the Big 12. So Big 12, ACC, Pac-12 have all released their 2023 schedules, as have the SEC and Big 10. But bottom line is we know what those schedules look like plus 2 or 3 games. So the SEC really, it's, all but one game because you have a permanent rival in the other division. So no surprises there except for order of the games. But Big 12, ACC, and Pac-12, all divisionless. So conference release since the new year. We're talking Texas and Oklahoma. This will be 1 year of a giant Big 12 conference. You've got 14 teams in the Big 12. Let's talk who's got the easiest and most difficult schedules since we've seen them been released. Daniel, who is one team that you think got an unlucky draw? Who has a difficult schedule in the Big 12?
The Big 12.
I can also give you one if one of them really jumped out to me. Well, 2, but
yeah, go.
TCU. This is a team that obviously played for the national championship, but they turn around, and I'm talking just conference schedule here. Not that their non-conference is difficult, because it's not.
Right.
But just conference schedule. After their bye week, their last 4 games of the season, they go to Texas Tech. They play Texas at home, Baylor at home, and then to Oklahoma. Going into the bye, you've got Iowa State on the road, BYU at home, Kansas State on the road. This is a team that won 7 one-score games in 2022. That's a
And they're losing a
difficult draw.
lot to the NFL draft.
Losing a lot. So TCU is one that seems to be a theme in the Big 12 that I guess TCU did not win the conference, but the best team typically gets a difficult schedule, it seems, the following year. And that is definitely the case here, I think, in Fort Worth. So I think TCU is a loser when it comes to schedule release.
So it's tough because it's funny with the Big 12 for years, they've just all played everybody in the conference. Now they finally have too many to do that. And it's actually 14 teams this year because it's, like we said, that awkward year with Texas and Oklahoma still in. It's looking at Kansas State. You mentioned, they're actually the champion. They go to UCF, a newly minted member.
So
and then
Gray is home. If you're looking at the same.
Oh, just kidding. Just kidding. That's confusing.
It is confusing. That doesn't make any sense.
UCF is going to be a tough game regardless of where they play. Going to Stillwater after the bye week, and then going to Austin, and then finishing their last 3 of their last 4 games, Texas, Baylor, and Iowa State. I think all of those are just tough matchups down the stretch. So, it's like they could be in a good position, like 6-0, 7-0, something like that. That last stretch, kind of similar to what you're talking about with TCU, and then they just fall out of the race when they're a team that's won the conference this year. They've Chris Kleiman has had them in a kind of a good position ever since he's gotten there. He's overachieved thus far. We had high expectations coming from North Dakota State, but I don't think we had Big 12 championship aspirations, and he's already done that, and who knows, they might rule the roost as soon as Texas and Oklahoma are out, but who really knows what's going to happen? That's really when it becomes the Wild West. But yeah, they definitely will have a somewhat tougher run of it.
Let me throw you a simple formula for a difficult schedule in the Big 12. So every team is going to not play 4 Big 12 teams, if that makes sense. There's 14-team league. You're going to play 9 conference games. So you're going to miss out on 4 teams. If I'm looking at the Big 12, let's just take, if I'm saying top 4 teams, all right, I'm going to take TCU and Kansas State. They just play for the Big 12 championship, all right? Then I'm going to take your powerhouses, Texas and Oklahoma. I know that Oklahoma went 6-7. Let's be real for a second. They've owned the conference for, ever. Texas is Texas. Only one team has to play all 4 of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas State, and TCU. Only one team in the Big 12 does not get to skip any of those games, is Iowa State. So Iowa State plays Kansas State, TCU, Texas, and Oklahoma. So I think they are a difficult Big 12 schedule.
Definitely.
Those are the only ones that stuck out to me as far as difficult goes. Any more stick out to you?
Not for difficult, no.
Let's go to easy. Who's got an easy draw?
Well, West Virginia, they missed Texas, and
right.
You and I are both going to be pretty high on Texas this year.
Surprise.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that they're able to, somewhat they're not playing Texas or Kansas State. They do play Oklahoma, but yeah, there's a lot of noise in the middle of the Big 12, which is what we talked about this year. So it's hard to say. I think you can kind of point out difficult, but if you point out easy, what might be easy to one team is difficult for another team. So a team like West Virginia, even though they miss in Texas, these other teams aren't necessarily a cupcake. So it's not like they're going to just prance through their schedule. That's one thing that's the Big 12 has done great is, just at least in the middle, they have a great middle class. It's very competitive and there's a lot of parity amongst those teams. So as we dive in, I bet you we're going to have that. But yeah, I'd say West Virginia has a pretty good situation with not having to play Texas. Of course, in their non-conference, they're playing Pitt and Penn State. So that's going to be fun to dissect as we do some Big 12 conference. I'm glad that rivalry is still there with Pitt, but yeah,
Right.
amazing.
They get that at home this year. Yeah, they get that at home this year.
Yeah.
I'll highlight a newcomer. So UCF, I think, is a winner here. One thing that I've heard, Bud Elliott has said this a lot of 24/7, but like you want when you're looking at win totals, and they haven't come out yet, so we'll see what it is for UCF. But it's helpful to have your super losable games on the road.
Right.
Like you don't want your losable games at home. Like if you're going to lose, go ahead and lose.
You're wasting it. Right.
You're wasting a home game. Yep. So UCF, of those 4 teams I mentioned, they only play Oklahoma and Kansas State. They miss Texas and TCU, and both of those games are on the road, as is the game against Cincinnati and Texas Tech. Their home games are Baylor, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and Houston. That's a really decent draw.
Right.
Especially first year in the conference. Cincy as well. They don't have quite the home road split, but again, you avoid Texas, TCU, and Kansas State if you're Cincinnati. So again, newcomers kind of got a softball coming into the league. At least those two did.
Yeah, and one other thing, I know we're not talking about non-conference, but we're talking about TCU anyways, so might as well mention, I mean, how fun is their opening game against Colorado? I'm excited to talk more about that. Just obviously the Deion Sanders effect, him bringing in, it's just going to look completely different. And, a team that was in the national championship game, I don't want to say they're likely going to get beat by Colorado, but I, at this point, would probably know more players on Colorado's team than I would on TCU's team. So, just interesting little nugget there that opening weekend. I mean, it can't get here soon enough.
Oh, yeah. I'm pumped for that one. I'll highlight one more schedule. It's not difficult or easy, just funny. Houston plays 7 of their games in the state of Texas. So they play UTSA, Rice, TCU, Sam Houston State, Texas Tech. That's their first 5 games. They will not leave the state. Bye week. Then after the bye, they've got Texas and Baylor still on the schedule. So 7 games in state. How fun is that?
That is fun. Wait a second, but the Gray is home?
So, yes, but I'm saying all those teams are in the state of Texas regardless.
I got you. They're playing in the state of Texas.
Yep. So I'm like, they don't have to go. Well, I guess Texas is huge. I guess you'd have to go far sometimes, but just funny. You're getting to see all these Texas teams play each other. Excited to see like Houston play the TCU's, Texas's conference games.
Right.
Southwest Conference throwback. Let's go from 112 to the other. I want to end with the ACC because that's the one that is really changing. Pac-12 got rid of divisions last year, but still had division schedules. So this is the first iteration of the Pac-12 schedule that really is impacted by the changes that were made. So winners and losers of the Pac-12 schedule. I do have one beef with the Pac-12 schedule, and that is, why did you have to go columns instead of rows? If you've looked at like a helmet schedule or a logo schedule, a conference schedule before, you'll know what I mean. Everyone does the same thing. The teams are on the left
Pac-12.
and they go left to right. Yeah, Pac-12 is like, we are the Pac-12. We got to be different. So it's whatever. I will suffer through, read the schedule. Daniel, what is a schedule that sticks out to you as most difficult? Or again, I'm happy to start.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Colorado
Yeah.
to me, it's
That
just,
was my number one.
and you think I'm not even mentioning non-conference, which is tough in and of itself, but at
Yeah.
Oregon, they get USC at home, but I mean, USC's probably going to do their thing. Um, UCLA, one of the top teams as well. Obviously, they end the year at Utah, and then Oregon State. I mean, all of those games, I don't even have as an up in the air game. I have those as losses to start with. Not even talking about, the Arizona States of the world. You got to go to Tempe, and so it's gonna be tough sledding. We'll see what they're made of. I mean, but that's not easy because I definitely think Oregon and USC, as in many years, and I can't believe I'm leaving out Utah, who keeps winning the Pac-12 even time I talk about Oregon and USC. So let me also mention Utah. They have all three of them on the schedule, and I guess I'm talking about Oregon. And Oregon State beat them last year, so it's that up and comer of Oregon. I mean, it's just they're all that's the top four team. Like, you're leaving out Washington. I'm leaving out Washington, but nonetheless, that's going to be those four teams are probably going to rule the roost this year. And I'm shorting UCLA. All of those are strong. There's like six good teams. I say good, not great. Six good
No,
teams in the
I think
Pac-12.
legit they can have 6 top 30 teams,
Yeah,
which is great for the Pac-12. I mean,
and two of them could be top 8. Like
I think
strong.
3 of them can be top 15. I mean,
Yeah.
potentially
So
top 10. We'll see. We'll get into that.
that'll be fun.
One of those top teams, though, that I think has a really difficult schedule, USC. I think USC is a team, just based on the schedule, that could be better on the field and worse in the win-loss column.
And the record wise, yeah.
Like if you're just looking at the schedule visually, like you and I are right now, there's one team that it's a weird, like, oh wow, their bye week's not in line with everybody else, and it's USC because they play a week 0 game, so they have a bye week in week 3. Then they play 9 games in a row to end the season. Then they have a bye week before the conference championship. That might not matter if you don't make the conference championship, but
Yeah. If they make the conference championship,
it's
then
great.
chess not checkers. They just outdid whoever they're playing. But if they don't make it, then they just look like fools. They ended 2 weeks early instead of 1 week early.
Dude, and you have the last 6 games is at Notre Dame, home against Utah, at Cal, home against Washington, at Oregon, home against UCLA. That's the toughest 6-game stretch in the Pac-12. Like, in the fact that you have to, Notre Dame's not a conference game, but it just adds to that run that they've got to make. That's just a difficult schedule. Easy schedules. I have one that really stuck out.
Okay, which one did you have?
UCLA. You avoid Oregon and Washington.
Yeah, that's strong.
And like again, like your road games are your more losable games. So like Utah's on the road, USC's on the road, Oregon State's on the road. So your hardest games are on the road. Like there's no reason they shouldn't go 9-3. Like even if you lose all 3 of those games, that's 9-3.
Yeah. I would say Arizona also has pretty tough with having at USC they play Washington at home, play USC at home or play UCLA at home, excuse me, and they do play Utah as well. So they get all 4 of those. They miss Oregon, but that's still tough for Arizona, who, especially when you're thinking about who they are, they want to, if they have an easier schedule, then it could appear that they're, bowl team, that kind of thing. This may hinder them in that endeavor.
Oh yeah. Let's jump to the ACC, which for the first time ever going divisionless, top 2 teams will play for the conference championship. So big shakeups with the schedule, and this was fun. So I have like 2 different difficult categories. I've got difficult conference schedule, and then I've got like a non-ACC difficult schedules. Like when it's mixed with your ACC schedule, that makes it really, really tough. Do you have any school you want to start with?
Yeah, are we starting with toughest?
Yeah, toughest.
I mean Duke, because
Yes, that was my number one.
they play FSU, Clemson, NC State, UNC. That's their every year rivalry.
Miami,
Uh,
Notre
my
Dame.
yeah, they don't miss. I mean, shoot, Wake Forest, even though they're going to be losing some, Dave Clawson, he don't just give away games. So it's going to be tough sledding for Duke. Pitt is probably going to be tough. So yeah, that's
That one's
no
hard.
no bueno.
Excuse me. I will mention Pitt as one of my difficult conference schedule, but really difficult out of conference schedule. So their out of conference games are hold on. They're doing 8 conference games, right? 1, 2, 3. No, they're doing 9 conference games. Are they doing 9 conference games?
Well,
Sorry. 1, 2,
Notre Dame
3,
counts as a
4.
conference game.
It does. So are they doing 9 then? Hold on. No, they're doing 8 conference games.
Oh yeah, so Notre Dame is just the agreement. It's not the
Yeah, it's just the agreement. Okay, they're still doing 8. Pitt. So Pitt plays Cincinnati, West Virginia, and Notre Dame out of conference.
Yep.
North Carolina plays South Carolina, Appalachian State, Minnesota out of conference.
All to start the year.
Yeah. And they're all at home, luckily, but man, that's tough. And then I mean, this happens to Georgia Tech every year, it seems like, but when they're playing Ole Miss and Georgia out of conference, Georgia's the rival, but that's tough sledding when you got Clemson as one of your permanent rivals in the ACC as well now, even in the new scheduling format. So that's who I had as most difficult.
And they got beat. What was it by Ole Miss last year? 42-0.
It was something bad. It was TVMA is what it was.
Yeah, I was at Disney World when it happened, so I was happy, but they weren't.
They were not happy.
It was bad. I think they got lucky though, because most people were watching Auburn and Penn State, so they weren't paying attention to Georgia Tech.
Right.
Getting rent, but Ole Miss, they're planning on doing that again. So
and this one's at Ole Miss.
That's tough sledding.
A schedule that I think is so difficult non-con, but then the easiest ACC schedule. I had one far and away easiest one. Any guesses?
Probably Louisville.
So Louisville is not in my top 4.
Okay.
Virginia. They don't play Clemson. They don't play Florida State. They don't play Notre Dame. And I know Notre Dame's the weird, like, I'm counting that as ACC schedule because they play, eight ACC teams or 6 or something like that.
Yeah, I think it used to be 5. It might be 6 now with this schedule, with this new format. But
they're
yeah,
the only team in the ACC that avoids all 3. So like that's
wow.
a win schedule wise. Louisville I had up there.
Of course, in the non-con, Tennessee,
Right.
James Madison, who's no picnic for anybody.
No.
And then Maryland, which, I mean,
you get William and Mary.
William
we'll see
and
who shows
Mary.
up. Be both of them. That's 2
you
teams.
You got to play both. So I don't know if that's fair.
But super excited to see how these schedules play out. Fun to see and talk about. Wish the college football schedule would allow for more of this so we could talk about schedules more as they release in the spring. But happy to talk about it now. Daniel, there's some coaches moving around, coaches getting new contracts. I do have to take 1 second and just talk about Brian Ferentz's new contract. So,
yikes.
Brian Ferentz, a.k.a. the biggest case of nepotism in the United States, as Daddy is the head coach, Brian Ferentz, the offensive coordinator at Iowa. They averaged 17.7 points per game this past season. but almost average a touchdown a game defensively. So offense was horrible.
Not good.
So he got a new contract through June 30th of 2024. And here are the parameters for if that contract gets renewed. Iowa has to win 7 games, including their bowl game. So AKA what Iowa's done every year for a long time. Second, they have to average 25 points per game. Do you want to guess 2 things, Daniel? Do you want to guess where 25 points per game would rank nationally in 2022?
Okay. Let me do that. Well, hold on. Okay. 25 points a game, 2022. Okay. I think every top 40 team is definitely over 30 points a game.
Yes.
So I feel lock that in. 28 points a game feels like that's like the top 60. 85.
I'm not even kidding. It's 85. You literally nailed it. I'm not even kidding. It's 80. I think it's 84th is what it would have ranked.
Okay.
But
Okay.
still, I'm like, oh my gosh, you nailed it. Yeah. 84th nationally.
Wow.
So not like the bar is very high. One more trivia question, and I'll let you go. Do you want to know Brian Ferentz's average points per game since being the offensive coordinator at Iowa?
And now, including this past year, if they exclude this past year, I think it used to be, wasn't like 27 points a game
So
prior
including
to
this year, 25.9, which here's why it's funny. I was like 25 seems like a weird number because in football, it's what are some common 20 scores? 24, 27, 28, 21. You don't get 25s in football. Like, where'd they get 25 from? Oh, he's averaged 25.9 points per game as an offensive coordinator. So that's where they got 25. It's just funny. This is hilarious. I hope they need, like, it's the last game of the season and they need like 30 points to get to the 25 points a game mark.
Here's the thing.
And they're 5-6, or like they're 6-5 or something. It's like that game you need to win and you got to score 30.
That would be insane.
Oh yeah.
But like Cade McNamara coming in, we'll see how this whole thing plays. But my thought was like, oh yeah, we're gonna see an offensive coordinator change to go along with the quarterback, and they got a couple of different transfers on offense that I felt good about. Like, we're gonna have some playmakers here in Iowa to go along with that defense, where that defense just can always be solid regardless of who they're putting in the league. They've got guys going in the league this year. I think they're still going to be a very, top 10, top 15 defense at worst. So, yeah, if you could just, Jacob, if they made a top 40 effort on offense, you're talking about a playoff team potentially. The Big Ten's tough, but that's really what it is. If they set their goals higher, and here's the thing, we've got new, this is last year, the Big Ten West, right?
Should be, yes.
Allegedly, maybe. Okay, well, Wisconsin, they may have taken it off for a couple of years. They're back. I don't care what Luke Fickell, they're back. Like, I just think they're going to grind out everything, and they're going to be the toughest out in the Big Ten West, at least. Well, Nebraska, I don't think they're laughing stock anymore. I think they're going to come right in. They got transfers. This is going to be so much fun to dissect, talking about Nebraska, talking about these other teams. But they got some transfers in from Georgia, from other places that I think Nebraska is going to be ready to go. Matt Rule, we're really high on him. And then every other team in the West, I feel like is just competitive. So, for Iowa, they got to step their game up. This was a missed opportunity to like really go after it. And there's been schools, like, if your complaint is your defense is so good, you want to play complimentary football, you don't want to go too fast, whatever, that there's ways to do it. It's been modeled at the highest level with teams like Georgia, but I mean, even it's just you've got to be able to have some sort of balance and take some pressure off your defense. They shouldn't have to score every game, so it gets tough.
It is tough. More schools making some coaching hires. Alabama hired 2 coordinators this past week. Tommy Rees going to be your OC, and DC is going to be Kevin Steele. Kevin Steele was actually Nick Saban's first defensive coordinator at Alabama. I'm just curious. We haven't talked about it. What's your reaction to these hires?
So with the Reese hire, so both of them, I could sum them up with but I also kind of get it. I think that these hires were made for different reasons. So starting with the Reese hire, I think he's a young guy who has kind of worked his way up. He's been at a big program before, um, actually coming from his alma mater, so that's a big deal. But I think that it's important for Nick Saban to get a guy in that is not going to just be there for a year or two and then leave as a hotshot coordinator to the NFL or to be a head coach at college football. I think he's kind of wanting to have some stability there, to cultivate some stuff. And the Bill O'Brien thing just was not working. So I think instead of him going to get like a head coach and, bring him back as a coordinator or bringing in someone from the NFL, I think this was the right move. Get a guy from major college football, bring him in. So I think it's a good hire. And I think it's doing what Nick Saban wants to do, which is, I think
Go
Tommy Reese
backwards.
I think he uses his best players. I would say at Notre Dame, you had a wealth of talent on the offensive line and a wealth of talent at tight end. They were your better players. You run through them rather than, your wide receivers. Now, granted, he probably, deserves some credit for recruiting the quarterbacks and wide receivers that weren't able to produce at a very high level. But, I think you're going to have the Jimmies and Joes at Alabama. We'll get to see. These are both we'll see hires, kind of. Kevin Steele, some would call it uninspired. That's kind of how I felt. But I also felt like the defensive coordinator job at Alabama is it's like you're hiring a senior level, employee. You need a candidate who's got a master's degree. It's one of those high level, high ranking jobs that you find out in the business world. You're not interviewing everybody. I think, the one with the least amount of baggage out there was probably Kevin Steele for being available. And so I think this is kind of a make sense hire for Nick Saban. I think Jeremy Pruitt, that had gotten a little bit of traction. There's just too much baggage for right now. That may be something that they eventually revisit. And then there's mention of Todd Grantham. I think that the fan base would have, erupted if Todd Grantham, who has been an analyst over there, if he had become defensive coordinator, well-traveled SEC coordinator who has been embattled. I mean, third and Grantham has been a thing. And I think Alabama fans would be upset if that was the case. So honestly, I think this is a big sigh of relief, if anything, with these hires. I don't think that they're bad hires. I don't think they're necessarily home runs, but Saban's there. I'm willing to see what's going to happen. It did leave me kind of scratching my head though a little bit.
Reese, I will say, I'm not a college football head coach, but I know some really good ones. And Brian Kelly wanted him to follow him to LSU. So Brian Kelly wanted him. Now Nick Saban's hired him. So 2 of the best coaches in college football wanted this guy as their offensive coordinator. He also had Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner playing quarterback for him the past year. So, he hasn't gotten the best quarterback play. So
he is walking into Jalen Milroe, and so
Ty Simpson.
He needs to develop the young guys as far as a passer goes, unless he's going to run with the quarterback.
Oh yeah. So, Reese, I Kevin Steele. Do you Do you think he hired Steele because Pruitt didn't get approved by the SEC?
That there was a rumor going around that that was the case, and that some Alabama reporter had said something about, I think you probably saw this, that like Jeremy Pruitt approved the hire. I'm like, let me tell you something. Nick Saban's not going to Jeremy Pruitt saying, "You think this is okay?" I do think that Pruitt was deep in talks. That makes sense that it was blocked. And now you've seen someone like Hugh Freeze, similar situation, has been approved. So maybe it's hey, we
You
just
got
got
to
to
give it
get
a
a
few
few more
years.
years in between this before he can come back in. So it may be a stopgap, but I think Steele could be an improvement, but the years that he had that were really good were at Auburn, and those players were really good players. Alabama has good players because they always tend to have good players. I just don't know if they've got special, like really great Alabama players. They're losing some. We'll see. They just obviously had the best recruiting class in the history. We'll see how it shakes out. I hope he's able, for their sake, to develop and do what he does. The big thing for Saban is he speaks the same language, and that's usually the step one. So he can kind of come in and just fire off from day one.
So now some schools need, I'll say specifically offensive coordinator. Miami fired Josh Gaddis. Notre Dame needs an offensive coordinator. I'm seeing Shannon Dawson is a name to watch at Miami. He is currently the offensive coordinator at Houston, air raid guy. Notre Dame, a lot of names have been thrown around. Two that I really like are Andy Ludwig and who was the other one I told you? Joe Moorhead.
Oh yeah,
If they can get either of those guys,
Moorhead. They're both would be good. I think
yes.
Moorhead just he's been he is he currently at Penn State?
No. Um,
No, he's a head coach somewhere. He's a head coach in I'm sorry. He was the most recent coordinator job was Penn State, and then he's been a
Akron.
head coach at
Akron.
Akron. And that was awesome. So they've been good. And then his year at Mississippi State gets thrown in, but honestly, he was fine. It just wasn't a culture deal in the SEC, but he was great at Oregon, great at Penn State. I think he would be, ready for that role. Another name I saw was Colin Klein from Kansas State. I think what he was able to do under Chris Kleiman, um, you know, he was mentioned as far as getting an interview with Notre Dame. I think he'd be kind of an up and comer. He's similar to Tommy Rees, I think, in style. So I think stylistically, if that's what they're wanting to do, get kind of a young guy that's similar to Rees, you might see Freeman do that. I'm also interested to see kind of what Freeman's style is because he hired Al Golden to be a defensive coordinator. Um, so, more of a vet. And then Freeman's just a young, energetic guy. Does he try to go young on offense um, as well, or is he trying to get more of a like Moorhead would be more of that classic vet, style versus getting another young guy because you want to balance out your experience on the coaching staff. That's always very important to make sure that if you're a young head coach, you've got some veterans around you. If you're an older head coach, maybe get some juice with some younger guys that you can develop and keep long term. Good for recruiting. So very interesting to see Notre Dame premier brand. Excited to see what they do. They're going to have to answer quick. I think this hire is going to happen maybe by the time people are listening to this because it might be something on Friday, something on Monday. I know the interviews are happening today and yesterday, and I think probably some more tomorrow.
Excited to see who fills it. Excited to see who gets hired at Miami as well. And we're going to talk about it all right here on the Extra Point. As more news comes in, be sure this is the place you got to be. You got to hit subscribe. Got to hit the bell if you're on YouTube for notifications. Because as news pours in, we're going to cover it here on the Extra Point. Be sure to follow us on social media at the Extra Point Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And we'll be back next week. One thing we are going to talk about, Bill Conley not a friend of the show. Would love for him to be, but I'm a fan of Bill Conley, and he released his returning production for 2023 on ESPN Plus. So be sure to check that out there. We're going to talk about it next week. There's a reason people are excited about Florida State. I will tease it there. But be sure to follow Daniel on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I'm Jacob.